this Sunday on Rosemary Barton Live.
The geopolitical situation is shifting remarkably.
Bold new vision. Canada asserts itself on the world stage as rules-based order erodes under Donald Trump. What's at stake as Ottawa goes on the offensive? The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Anita Anand, is here.
Mark Carney's actions doesn't match his rhetoric, and Canadians can't eat speeches.
View from the opposition. The Conservatives praise Mark Carney's speech in Davos, but also call for more action to help Canadians. Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer joins me.
If the goal was to achieve peace and safety, this is doing exactly the opposite.
City on edge. ICE agents fatally shoot another American in Minneapolis amid an immigration crackdown. I'll ask a Minneapolis city councilor about the growing unrest. It all starts now on Rosemary Barton Live. Thanks for joining us on this Sunday. We are, of course, watching developments in Minneapolis following the fatal shooting, yet again, of an American by ICE agents in that country's immigration crackdown. We'll be joined, as I said, by a Minneapolis city councilor a bit later in the hour. But here in this country, it was a whirlwind week for Canada and the Prime Minister on the world stage after his speech at Davos.
Let me be direct. We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition. Great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons. Tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion, supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited. You cannot live within the lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes the source of your subordination.
While Trump was not explicitly named in that speech, you could definitely hear that that's who the Prime Minister was talking about, as well as the impacts of his tariffs, sparking Trump to fight back against Canada throughout the week and leading him to say this.
Canada gets a lot of freebies from us, by the way. They should be grateful also, but they're not. I watched your Prime Minister yesterday. He wasn't so grateful. But they should be grateful to us. Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements.
Trump then went on to rescind his invitation for Carney to join his Board of Peace for the Middle East and is now threatening 100% tariffs on Canada if it moves forward with a trade deal with China. This morning, I spoke to the Foreign Affairs Minister about the Prime Minister's speech and Trump's reaction. Minister Anita Anand joins me now. Nice to see you this morning. Thank you for coming in. There's lots happening. There's lots happening in your portfolio and around the world. I want to start with the comments made by President Trump yesterday on Truth Social. He said that Canada has voted in favor of doing business with China, who will eat them up within the first year. And yesterday he threatened 100% tariffs on Canada if it makes a deal with China. What did you make of those comments?
So, to be clear, Canada and the U.S. have had and will hopefully continue to have a long-standing trade relationship. $3.3 billion of trade in goods and services pass through the Canada-U.S. border every day. Mm-hmm. In addition, the trip to China was very much about resolving trade frictions and settling some specific issues. There is not a discussion about a free trade agreement with China. That's not the purpose of the visit, and I'm sure that we'll continue to diversify our trade relationships across the board, recognizing the importance of the Canada-U.S. economic relationship, and at the same time not putting all of our eggs in one basket. Sure. China, India, Indonesia, the Gulf states, $71 billion UAE investment coming to Canada. Those are the types of trade diversification strategies we'll continue to embark on. And
I know you're not the trade minister, but you were on this big trip with the Prime Minister, and I'll talk more about his speech and other things. But the China portion of the trip that you also did, you know, there were concerns about how we manage that relationship with China from a security perspective. Are we giving up too much to China, allowing them to sell EVs in Canada and things like that? So how do you make sure that that isn't the case, that we're rebuilding the relationship but not going too far? far?
So from a diplomatic standpoint, my approach is to ensure that we are raising issues of concern to Canada at every step of the way,
Right.
while also discussing the economic relationship. These are the times that we are in now. The geopolitical situation is shifting remarkably, and we need to meet the moment. And that means diplomacy, not walking away from the table, diplomacy, having the tough conversations, not hiding under a rock, discussing Canadian concerns from a human rights or public security standpoint, while at the same time ensuring that we're putting Canada's economic interests on the table. And so we do have guardrails, and from a public security standpoint, we ensure that we put the concerns of Canadians on the table. This is not easy diplomacy, Rosie. Diplomacy is not about hiding under a rock. It's about having those tough conversations and ensuring that the interests of the Canadian public are protected, for sure.
Let's talk a little bit about the speech that got a lot of attention around the world, the Prime Minister's speech. It was about, yes, the old order not coming back, what the Prime Minister has talked about many times in this country, the rupture with the United States, and then the work of middle powers to stand up for what they need and what is right. What does that mean for Canada moving forward in your mind, like in a practical way, in a way that will, that Canadians can understand and will be able to see?
Well, I really think this is a key question, because as I have discussed with the Prime Minister, he has set the framework for much of what we will do in 2026 in terms of Canada being a middle power, but it now falls to the foreign minister and other ministers to implement, and that's exactly what we will do. As a middle power, what we seek to do is ensure that our interests are being met, and we do that with a group of countries on several issues already. Look at the Coalition of the Willing on Ukraine, look at the work that we do from a Five Eyes perspective. These are all groups of countries that are addressing pragmatically interests that we respectively hold. This will continue. And indeed, at Davos, I met with a group of countries that wanted to address Ukraine's energy needs in the face of illegal and unjustifiable Russian strikes at their electricity grid. These are the types of pragmatic steps that we will continue to take as middle powers and ensure we're meeting the moment.
Does it mean, though, that we are turning away from the United States? And I don't mean, obviously, geographically we're not, but from a security perspective, from a trade perspective, does it mean that we're realigning ourselves with other countries?
The plate tectonics have shifted in terms of trade, in terms of global alliances. And what Canada will continue to do is to group and gather with countries that have similar interests. Look at the Prime Minister's work across the board with India and Australia on information technology and data when we were at the G20. That was a coalition, if you will, that arose on an impromptu basis while the leaders were discussing the interests of our respective countries. And that is what this world requires as we see the multilateral relationships of the past number of decades since the end of the Second World War essentially shift in ways that we may not have expected, but in ways that we have to respond to pragmatically.
The President says he's disinvited or uninvited the Prime Minister from his Board of Peace for the Middle East. Do you know anything about why that happened or what the invitation was in the first place?
I've been studying the Board of Peace documents intensely, and I will say that I did not expect that we would be disinvited. At the same time, our policy in terms of the Middle East, in terms of assisting Gaza, will continue. What does that mean? That means that Hamas must disarm. That means that Hamas must have no role in the future governance of Palestine. That means that Canadian humanitarian aid will continue to be a top priority. $400 million on the table already for humanitarian aid for Gaza. These are key principles of our foreign policy vis-a-vis ensuring that the Israelis and the Palestinians can live in peace and security side by side for decades and decades and decades.
Is the threat against Greenland over now? From your perspective, does it seem as though that has quieted? Because obviously that was what we were all dealing with at the beginning of last week.
Well, let's take a step back and think about the very fundamental perspective that Canada has vis-a-vis Denmark and Greenland, and that is that territorial integrity and state sovereignty are fundamental principles. I'm going to be traveling to Greenland next week, in fact, with the Governor General and our Arctic Ambassador, Virginia Mearns. We want and will continue to engage with both Denmark and Greenland in order to ensure that we're standing up for those principles. We're going to formally open a consulate, and let's just say that this is another example of states coming together to support another, this time in the NATO context.
I'll just end again on the president who, in social media, has gone back to the phrase governor, called the Prime Minister Governor of Canada, Governor Carney. I mean, the relationship now seems to have deteriorated to another level. Does that worry you? Should that worry Canadians that we're back to that point now?
The relationship has extended over decades and decades, and this will continue in terms of ensuring that we have a strong and vibrant economic relationship with our largest trading partner. I will be traveling to the United States, in fact, next week to engage with a group of countries on subjects relating to critical minerals. This is the work that we will continue to do with our largest trading partner. At the same time, we need to protect and empower the Canadian economy, and trade diversification is fundamental to that. That is why we went to China. That's why we will be going to India. And that is why we won't put all our eggs in one basket.
Okay. Minister, you have a very busy travel schedule. Thank you for making the time. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
You heard the minister mention there that tariff deal with China. It includes movement on Canadian canola and Chinese EVs, but China also ended its ban on Canadian beef, which has been in place since 2021, allowing Canadian cattle ranchers to sell to China for the first time in half a decade. This comes as relief to the Canadian beef industry, with beef prices in Canada at record highs and expected to continue to rise over the next year. Tyler Fulton is a third-generation cattle rancher from Manitoba. He's also the president of the Canadian Cattle Association. Nice to see you.
Nice seeing you.
So China has opened up the market again to Canadian beef. I guess this is the first time since 2021. What did you think when you heard this news?
I was excited. Honestly, we've been working on this for a number of years, and it's nice to get a success like that. I mean, to be clear, we shouldn't have been out of China, but yeah, we were really excited, and we knew that it was meaningful for the whole industry.
So how important is that market for Canadian cattle ranchers? Give me a sense of the scale of it.
Yeah, we were on a strong trajectory of increasing exports there, and I believe we were, in the ballpark of around $100 million annually in value. So it was significant, but it's more than just that. What it does is it adds resilience to the whole sector by having more diversified markets for beef, for Canadian beef. But in China in particular, the products that they desire are not the same as what we desire here in Canada and North America, and so it's quite complementary, actually.
Oh, okay, interesting. So, for you personally, did you feel the impact of that on your cattle ranch?
Well, I mean, it's still early days, so we'll see. I am actually really optimistic that it will make a material difference. I think I was talking to one of our cattle market analysts, and the reference is, probably something like $10 to maybe $12 per hundredweight, assuming we kind of return to the same levels that we were at.
Did you, though, but at your ranch, did you feel the hit when you didn't have that market to sell to anymore, or were you able to make it up in other places?
Oh, yeah. No, it's so diffuse, right? You think about the whole value chain. We've gone through 2 decades, the better part of 2 decades, with very tight margins in the cow-calf sector. And so we've seen things appreciate recently, and every little bit and contributed to margin.
Beef is very expensive right now. That's not news to you. It's not news to anyone that goes to the grocery store. Record highs, I think, and that's for a lot of different reasons. If I understand correctly, drought, cost of feed. You can tell me what it is, but how much pressure is there right now for cattle ranchers, Canadian cattle ranchers?
Yeah, so the price at the retail level is actually feeding back more than it has in years back to the farm gate. We're dealing with record high cattle prices as well, and it is a function of the fact that the supply is so tight. Quite simply, drought and even the demographics within the industry contributed to really the tightest supplies, not just in Canada, but in the United States as well. And that really is what's driving the prices. The other thing you got to kind of keep in mind is that the lead time on when we produce cattle is so long. It's something in the ballpark of around 2 years before from kind of start to finish.
Right. How many do you have? How many cattle do you have?
We run about 650 cows, and then we sometimes will typically go and feed the calves, sometimes for another, close to another year.
So tell me, with this, and I guess this will happen, the markets will open fairly quickly. I'm not sure if you know exactly when, but is there anything else now that is sort of that is presenting a challenge to cattle ranchers, or was this the main blockage?
So I would say, it's not unlike probably so many other industries, and that the uncertainty that, the current geopolitical reality brings to our business is really no different. We're at a stage where, with profits now being very good, we can reinvest, but there's hesitancy. Because of that uncertainty, and so we're really relying on being able to maintain the CUSMA agreement, because we rely on that two-way trade with our biggest trading partner, the United States.
Tyler Fulton, nice to meet you. Thank you for educating me a little bit in what you do. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Always good when you have a cowboy hat on a show. The Prime Minister's speech at Davos getting recognition around the world. The opposition leader applauded parts of it, but also called it empty rhetoric. The minority government heads back to the House tomorrow and will need the support from other political parties to get its agenda through. We'll speak with Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer about what the Conservatives are willing to support and what they will not. This is Rosemary Barton, live. The House of Commons returns tomorrow after a 6-week break. It comes after a jam-packed previous week for Mark Carney, including that substantial speech in Davos and a cabinet retreat. Meanwhile, the Conservatives are looking ahead to their convention next weekend, which will also serve as Pierre Poilievre's mandatory leadership review. I spoke to the Conservative House Leader about his party's priorities ahead of the House coming back. Andrew Scheer is the Conservative House Leader. Nice to see you.
Good to chat with you.
I'll talk a little bit about the House coming back and the rest of it, but I do want to get a little bit of reaction to a busy week and the Prime Minister's speech at Davos. Your leader responded. He called it eloquent. He called it well-crafted. He did go on to say other things too, but why did he feel the need to praise the speech in terms of, you know, the response to this moment?
Well, many of the things that Conservatives have been calling on were at least a little bit of lip service paid to them, but what our leader also highlighted was that Mark Carney's actions doesn't match his rhetoric, and Canadians can't eat speeches, and empty rhetoric isn't very nutritious. And when you look at what Mark Carney has done, specifically when Prime Minister Carney said that Canada can't try to appease or curry favor with one of the powerful nations because we'll just get played off against other middle powers. This right after he came back from China, a country that he called the greatest national security threat to Canada. He talked about a new world order and closer and strategic partnerships. So what we're saying is that while it's all well and good to say those kinds of things in front of a crowd like at Davos, what really matters is Canadians not being able to afford groceries, the cost of living crisis that keeps hurting so many Canadians, the fact that we still haven't got a pipeline permitted to the West Coast to open up new markets in Asia. So when we come back to the House of Commons, Conservatives are going to be calling on the government to match that with action.
Yeah, and I think that's all fair. That you know, that was a speech about geopolitics and foreign policy, and of course it doesn't directly affect Canadians. But just to go back to the China issue, because I did ask the Prime Minister about that before Christmas, about how you navigate that relationship, and he says that there are guardrails, and that the idea is not to create a new security relationship or to jeopardize national security with China, but to open up or expand the market there to help canola farmers, for instance, in your province. So what do you see as the way to manage how you deal with China? Because I don't think the Conservative Party says we shouldn't trade with China. How do you expect the government to navigate that relationship, though?
Well, we expect, first of all, to use the leverage that Canada does have. This Liberal government used $1 billion of taxpayers' money to provide a loan guarantee, to basically provide funds to a Chinese company to build ferries for British Columbia. That doesn't make any sense at the best of times, but surely that should have been used as a point of leverage. We have what China wants. They need to feed their people and fuel their economy. They need to buy what we have. So again, we have leverage on that. What we got in return from this deal is an expectation. The language was very curious in the Prime Minister's statement, saying that we expect tariffs on canola to come off, and that they will stay off on agricultural products until at least the end of this year. It seems like what this Liberal government has given up is, for sure, they've given access to the Chinese car manufacturers into the Canadian economy. That's a guarantee. What we've got in return is uncertain and not clear. So what we would say is, when you have the kind of leverage that we had going into that, you should come out with some better results. And the rhetoric around new world orders and you know, closer cooperation, that flies in the face of what Mark Carney said during the election campaign, when he said that China was the biggest national security threat. So he's, again, rhetoric not being matched up by words, but by actual action.
The president responded to that speech by saying, and I'm sure you saw it, that Canada lives because of the United States. Do you think that the speech itself may have hurt Canada's chances to renegotiate CUSMA, or was that the point, just to sort of decide that we cannot allow ourselves to be played by the U.S. president all the time?
Well, if you look at what Mark Carney promised Canadians he would do, he didn't just say that tariffs were an issue during the campaign. He said it was the central issue. He called an early election to basically say that he needed a mandate to deal with that. He then promised that there would be a deal with the United States by July. Since then, he's been sending all kinds of mixed signals. He was actually specifically asked when the last time he spoke to President Trump was, and he said, "Who cares?" You know, and I think just to a female reporter in Davos when he was asked a similar kind of question. He said, that question's boring. Well, it's not boring to the millions of Canadians whose jobs depend on trade access to the United States. It's not boring to people in the auto sector that have been laid off or who are worried about it. And I don't think you can pinpoint any one thing. Obviously, nobody can control what President Trump is going to do. We need to make our economy more resilient. 10 years of Liberal policies chasing away investment from our energy sector, the Liberal industrial carbon tax that puts Canadian manufacturers at a huge disadvantage when they're competing against American manufacturers. These are domestic Liberal policies that have hurt the Canadian economy, made us more dependent on the United States, and put our manufacturers at a disadvantage. So there's lots we can do domestically to help push back against these tariffs.
Okay, let me ask a couple of questions about the House of Commons. One of the things that has to happen is the Budget Implementation Act. It will obviously be a confidence vote. Does the Conservative Party plan to support the bill? Is there anything you could do to improve that? Is there something you want to see in order to avoid the House falling and plunging us into an election?
Well, you know, every minority parliament that I've been in, the onus is on the government to work with the other parties to find a path through. So, you know, we've had discussions in the past, over the past few months of this parliament, where we believe that it's in the best interest of the country. We've helped get legislation through various steps. So, you know, point to Bill C-5. Mark Carney said that this piece of legislation would be the magic bullet to finally, after 10 years of Liberal barriers to development, be the solution to get big projects built. It's almost a year into his mandate, and still not a single major project that's gone through the process. So this is what is this what he talked about when he said moving at unimaginable speeds? Conservatives have absolutely said when there's an interest to the Canadian people, when it's going to improve the economy or reduce the cost of living, we'll support that. There are measures that provide tax relief. Those are things we can support. But what the Liberals also do is they package them with things that we believe will be bad for Canadians, like in their budget implementation bill, giving ministers the power to circumvent the law. That's not something that Canadians were asking for in the last election. That's not something Mark Carney told Canadians he would do. And we've seen what happens when Liberals remove legal protections against corruption. So Conservatives are going to work with the Liberals where we believe it'll address the affordability issues and improve our economy.
I want to look ahead, if I can, to next weekend. It's a big convention for the Conservative Party. The leader will speak on Friday night, and there is going to be that leadership review. I don't think anyone doubts that Mr. Poilievre will do fine in the leadership review, the evaluation of the party. But I wonder whether you think the whole of caucus supports Mr. Poilievre's leadership, because, as you know, we ended the year probably in a way that no one wanted to. You guys had lost a couple of MPs that crossed the floor. So do you feel like the caucus supports Mr. Poilievre beyond just the party membership that will get to vote on his leadership next week?
Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, it's important to remember that Canadians voted for a minority government. They did not give Mr. Carney a majority mandate, and I believe it's inappropriate and it's anti-democratic for him to try to cobble together through backroom deals or forms of intimidation or pressure tactics to get the majority that Canadians specifically denied him. So
it is allowed, though, Mr. Scheer. Just to be fair, it is. You may not like it, but it is allowed.
Well, look, I believe most Canadians would agree that if you don't get a majority mandate from the people, making backroom deals with individual MPs to get something that the voters denied, while it may not be illegal, it might not be procedurally invalid, is certainly not the right thing to do, not the right way to get a majority mandate.
Okay, we'll see you back in Ottawa this week and in Calgary, too, for the big convention. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
The Liberal caucus also meeting today as they prepare to return to the House of Commons. Earlier this morning, Mark Carney was met with a standing ovation from his caucus after a nonstop winter break that took the Prime Minister to 3 countries in 9 days.
There you are. Hey, all right.
And today's caucus all suggest a new positioning for Canada on the world stage, and of course, eliciting some reaction from the United States. U.S. President Donald Trump says Carney should, quote, be more grateful. And he has now threatened 100% tariffs if Canada makes a deal with China. What does this mean for Canada moving forward? The Sunday Scrum is standing by. You're watching Rosemary Barton live.
We have commitments under CUSMA that not to pursue free trade agreements with non-market economies without prior notification. We have no intention of doing that with China or any other non-market economy.
That's the Prime Minister speaking earlier this morning in Ottawa, responding to questions about U.S. President Donald Trump's latest round of tariff threats. Trump upped the ante, after the World Economic Forum in Davos, posting to social media, referring to the Prime Minister as Governor Carney and claiming that China is a threat to the Canadian way of life, threatening new 100% tariffs on Canada if a deal is made with China. There is no free trade deal being made with China, to be clear. What does this mean for Canada's place on the world stage? Let's bring in our Sunday Scrum. Ryan Tumulty, a Toronto Star political reporter in Ottawa. Catherine Levesque, parliamentary reporter for the National Post. Rob Russo, a writer for The Economist. Everyone's in Ottawa. Rob, I'm going to start with you because you were on that trip with the Prime Minister and heard that speech in Davos. And now you see the reaction, somewhat delayed reaction from President Trump. But give me your sense of how the Prime Minister is trying to position Canada in relation to the United States.
Well, I think it would be a mistake to say that he's trying to triangulate Trump with China. He's going to India, for instance, in about a month and a half. India is going to play a huge role in the future of Canada's trade diversification as well. But what he did, beginning in Beijing, when he said that the United States is no longer a stable or reliable trading partner, or as reliable or stable as China was he was suggesting that, in effect, what I call the reverse Costanza. It's not me, he's saying, it's you, to Donald Trump. You're the one who has turned your back on your best friend. You're the one who doesn't want us to be your best trading partner anymore. You're the one who is, in effect, menacing our sovereignty, and now you're getting involved in potential secession in Alberta. So it's not me, it's you, and I need to do something about it. You know, we can't just sit here and be an abused partner. And if you go back to, I think it was April 3rd, 2025, during the election campaign, he kind of laid all of this out when he said, if the United States is no longer willing to lead, Canada will. Now, he had to know that doing that in that forum, using that language, was going to provoke Mr. Trump. So there may be a cost to pay for that, but it seems that he's willing to do that. And it'll be interesting to see. I see a lot of ads on social media that look like campaign ads, whether or not he uses this to spring into a spring election. If he doesn't get his majority, if his legislative agenda is thwarted by the Conservatives, I'm watching for that over the next few weeks.
Ryan, do you think that the speech it was risky, given what we've seen from the president over the past 24 hours or so?
Yeah, though I would say I think everything is risky with the president of the United States. You know, that when the news first came out that we had signed or made an agreement, I guess, with China, the president said, good on, Carney, way to go. Everyone should make a deal with China. A week later, you know, we're about to bring down the trade relationship with the United States and bring in 100% tariffs. So, you know, I think on some level, the Canadian government has decided that Trump is going to Trump. And there's not a lot you can do to control that. You know, I think Canadians see how, you know, irrational and how Trump's ability to flip on a dime on positions and issues, not just on the trade file, but of course on all sorts of domestic issues in the U.S. You know, they don't see him as a reliable negotiator. So I think Canada has to do what it's going to do. We've tried being very nice to him. We've tried, you know, taking a tougher stance through the last year, and both ways have failed at various times. So I think Canada is just going to keep doing what it can in this regard, and you almost have to take the risk that Trump will lash out at you as a given.
Catherine, I mean, that's all true, what Ryan said there. But we still want to have a negotiation of CUSMA. We still want to preserve those things, I think, what we have. So I wonder whether we are now in a more complicated position when it comes to that particular negotiation.
Oh, 100%. I mean, we can't change the reality that the U.S. is still our largest trading partner, and anything that President Trump may do or say will have an impact on us. So, I think that Mark Carney, by, giving this speech at Davos, I think, everyone can agree it was a very good speech. It really, I think, ignited some Canadian pride here at home, but at the same time, he poked the bear. And President Trump has very thin skin, and he will respond to things like that. And I think he reacted maybe mostly to the praise around this speech. So, yes, there are consequences to that. And I don't know if the federal government was prepared for so many reactions. And at some point, the Canadian government has to respond maybe a bit more forcefully. I mean, what we saw yesterday, with the president threatening these new tariffs on Canada, which, we'll see if they actually happen. We don't have a lot of details. I think what we saw, the response from Minister LeBlanc was to say, oh, don't worry. This is, we announced a strategic partnership, but really there's no free trade deal in the works, which is true. But, I kind of wonder if, the Canadian government was prepared for such a forceful reaction from President Trump. Another example maybe where the Canadian government could have maybe reacted in a more forceful way was, those comments about NATO and, about our Canadian soldiers. We saw British Prime Minister Keir Starmer respond in a very forceful way. Ultimately, Trump ended up praising UK troops. We didn't see, that forceful of a reaction immediately from the Canadian government, and certainly not from the Prime Minister. So really, I think they have to adjust to all that after poking the bear.
Well, and he's back to calling the Prime Minister governor, which, whatever. I don't know what we do with that. But Rob, did you get a sense when you were on the trip and talking to lots of people that they are prepared for the risks that come with that kind of speech, that there is a way forward, that they see a way forward?
Yeah, look, anybody who's raised toddlers into teenagers would have known that this was probably likely. So were they prepared? Yeah, I think they were prepared. I think initially they might have been surprised at the mildness of the reaction from President Trump. But here's the reality. They are dealing with a world that's changed, not of their own volition. I spoke to Mark Miller for a piece I'm doing on the kind of fallout of all of this, and he said, here's our challenge. We have to deal with the end of the world, and we have to deal with the end of the month. The end of the month stuff is very important for the government's re-election. People are having trouble meeting the end of the month payments. The end of the world is on a separate track, but they have to deal with that as well. It is a fact. We are dependent still on the United States for our prosperity and our security. That isn't going to change tomorrow. It's going to take years and years and years. And in the interim, we're going to have to deal with the reality of Donald Trump because he's here for 3 more years. And that means coming to some sort of arrangement on trade and some sort of exit ramp off this sort of slew of inanities from Mr. Trump is going to be required.
Rob Russo, thank you. Thank you for being here today. Catherine Levesque, thank you. And Ryan Tumulty, I think I'm going to see you on the radio tomorrow morning on The Current. Thank you all very much. Enjoy your Sunday.
Take care, Rosemary.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. ICE agents have shot and killed another person in Minneapolis. Local police have identified the man as 37-year-old Alex Pretty. Pretty was a U.S. citizen and a Minneapolis resident where he worked as an ICU nurse for veterans. Thousands of people have taken to the streets now to protest his death, the second fatal ICE-involved shooting in the city in less than a month. We'll hear from a city councilor who was on the ground in Minneapolis yesterday. That's after the break here on RBL. Officials in Minneapolis are speaking out after ICE agents shot and killed another person in the city. That is the second fatal shooting there involving ICE in less than a month.
We have seen these kinds of operations in other places, in other countries, but not here in America. Not in a way where a great American city is being invaded by its own federal government.
Alex Preddy was the man shot and killed by ICE agents. He was 37 years old, a U.S. citizen, and an ICU nurse. The Department of Homeland Security says Preddy was carrying a weapon and posed a direct and violent threat to officers. But local officials and witnesses in Minneapolis dispute that claim. Officials also say Preddy was a legal gun owner with a permit to carry. Witnesses say Preddy had been trying to help a woman who had been pepper sprayed and that he didn't resist or reach for a gun. And certainly you can see videos of all of this too online. Joining me now is Aisha Chugtai. She's a Minneapolis City Council member. Nice to see you this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me, Rosemary.
Yeah, really appreciate you being here because obviously we're watching these events happen in a state that is close to us. You were on the ground after this incident happened yesterday. Can you tell me what you saw and what it felt like to be there?
Yeah. Yesterday, ICE shot and killed one of my neighbors just a few blocks away from my home. When I arrived on the scene, as Alex was being put in an ambulance and taken away, I saw hundreds of ICE and Border Patrol agents swarm my neighborhood and very quickly begin indiscriminately harassing and hurting the community members that had gathered to mourn, to bear witness, to figure out what was going on, and then begin to indiscriminately deploy chemical irritants into one of the most densely populated neighborhoods in Minneapolis, into one of the youngest neighborhoods in the Twin Cities. And I think it was a really devastating and heartbreaking and angering sight as a resident of this community to witness.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that this happened right in your community. So my condolences to you. Did you know Alex, or did you just see him around the neighborhood, or?
I didn't know Alex, but I could only be so lucky to have a neighbor like Alex who was willing to stand up for me, for other families. Alex, till his last moments in life, did the same thing that he dedicated his life to taking care of people, to helping them in their moments of great need, and to protecting his neighbors from harm. We could all only hope to have a neighbor like Alex.
So what do you think is going to happen next? I mean, we are now in the same position as we were just a couple weeks ago after Renee Good was shot. Perhaps even worse because tensions are so high. The governor has asked for ICE to leave. The mayor, who I'm sure you do know, has asked ICE to leave. What do you think is going to happen here? Because it does seem to be getting worse, not just because of this other killing, but because of the protests and the way the administration, the Trump administration, seems quite dug in terms of making a point around immigration.
Well, I want to just push back on any insinuation that it's the protests that are happening here in response to the reign of terror, the brutalization, the occupation of Minnesota right now, that in any way is contributing to escalation in this community. Yeah, there's only one escalatory factor here, and it is the murderers and child kidnappers that we know as federal agents that are occupying our city. What I know for a fact will happen in the days and weeks that unfold here is Minnesotans will continue to stand up for each other. We will continue to make sure that when a mass stranger with a gun shows up to kidnap our neighbor's child or our own child, that we do every single thing we can to stop an abduction from happening, to keep a family together.
What are you hearing from people in the neighborhood? Like how real is the anxiety and the fear right now that either they will be taken or that something like this will happen again?
Yeah, it's really difficult actually to put into words and I really appreciate you asking about it. It's hard to quantify how terrifying it must feel for families that, can't leave their homes right now, and are risking their lives, really risking their lives to go to work so they don't get evicted from their home. The amount of fear it's palpable. And then in the broader community, I would also say, the amount of anger and heartbreak and grief is so large. And at the same time, I see more people every single day stepping up and saying, what else can I do to help my immigrant neighbors? What else can I do to make sure that I'm doing my part to get ICE out of Minnesota?
I just have about 30 seconds, but what are you going to do today? What is your plan today to get out there or do anything in response to it?
I'm going to be out in my community, and I'm going to continue to make sure that anytime I see federal agents showing up, that I'm outside, I'm bearing witness, I'm legally observing, and I'm helping protect my neighbors.
Aisha Chugtai, I know it's a difficult time for your city right now. Really appreciate you speaking with me this morning.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. We'll take a short break here. The Liberal caucus is meeting at this hour on Parliament Hill as the House gets ready to return tomorrow after a 6-week winter break. We will expect, of course, lots of questions for the government about its plans, and the Conservative Party pushing to see what more they will do to help Canadians with the affordability crisis. There's also a First Minister's meeting here in Ottawa on Thursday, so all the premiers will be in town to meet with the Prime Minister. And of course, at the end of next week, the Conservative Leadership Convention. That's in Calgary on Friday, where Pierre Poilievre will give a big speech and have a review of his leadership. We'll have special coverage from that on Friday. David Cochrane and myself will be there to help you understand what unfolds then, but there'll be 5,000 things that will happen before Friday. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you back here next Sunday, if not before. Take good care.